Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the Null Brothers. I don't know, these events are a little weird when you're standing up in front of all these people. You know, so, I guess we just started with, it all started, we started a militia, Michigan Liberty Militia in 2015. If you guys remember, that's when the BLM riots were starting, even back then when Trump was running. People were getting beat up in the streets just to go see the man. We had started our group. We worked security for several protests forever. What was it, 2018? 2018, there was a Trump rally and a rally for Patrick Kovac. He was running for governor. We were tasked with the security for the event. I had to work with GRPD, write up a proposal on how we were going to handle it if anything got out of control. They still weren't comfortable with militia doing it, so they reached out to the FBI. And the FBI in 2018 gave us a good report that our group was a solid group of people, that we had never committed a crime. 2020, the lockdown started happening. We didn't believe any of them, so we started going to the Capitol constantly. April 15th was the gridlock. We were the first 5 people on the lawn. There was cars all over the Capitol. Nobody would get on the lawn, so we went around and talked a bunch of people out of their cars, and then April 30th, there was another rally. I was inside the Capitol the whole day. They made it out like we stormed the Capitol with guns, and I was up in the gallery watching our legislation work, or supposed to work. Later on during the protest, Dan Chappell, FBI informant, leader of the Wolverine Watchmen, reached out to the FBI and said, I think these guys are planning on going into the Capitol. And we have testimony and we have text messages in that between the handler and him. They called the Capitol Police, the FBI did, and told them to let these people in. It's going to be the right type of violence they needed. Don't know what the type of violence was they expected, but the people, single file line, walked into the Capitol, got their temperatures taken, and went inside. They were singing songs, they were chanting. There was a few people upset. There was no violence there. We weren't even a part of it. We were up in the 3rd or 4th story. We were looking down on it because I was right outside the chambers the whole day. We had a picture go viral of our militia, and it was sent to our Facebook page, and it was actually in Chinese writing. We were front page news in China. We were front page news in, I think it was German. Shortly after that, I was invited down to a militia get-together. It was a national kind of, they were wanting to meet in Ohio, and I didn't know what to expect. I went down there, and there was 30, 40 people down there. It wasn't anything crazy. It was a bunch of militia guys worried about, because again, 2020, we had the summer of love and a pandemic at the same time. So while I was down there, I met a guy. His name was Steve Robeson. He was the national commander of the 3% Patriot Militia. He supposedly helped law enforcement stop sex trafficking, and his militia would take part in all this. He had a 501c3 that they took donations for, and he was supposed to be giving it to law enforcement. He then invited us to a cross-training event. We were up north in Menominee, Michigan, on vacation with the family. He reached out. Me and Mike and my son, we shot over to this cross-training event with his own militia. 50, 60, 70 people there. Kids playing in the pool. They were actually having a birthday party there. I didn't think anything of it. It was just like normal people getting there. We were there for 3 or 4 hours, and we left. Well, in the meantime of all this going on, we don't know that they're talking crazy shit at night after the FBI is getting them drunk and high and asking hypothetical questions. Mike and I weren't even there. We were gone. The FBI lied. They said we stayed overnight. We were in Cambria, Wisconsin, and that we took part. Well, they knew we had already left, and we weren't even there. We were at Copper Harbor on the second day of their cross training. A few months go by. We get invited to another one in Luther, Michigan. it was the same thing. I brought my kid. I was like, okay, it's going to be another one of these. While we get there, I know it's considerably small. And the FBI had, well, Steve Rosen, he's the FBI informant, who's the leader of the 3% Patriot Coalition. He set up groups and we did little trainings, and it was, like I said, it was normal. It was just weird. Later that night, he had left, a bunch of the guys left. We were around drinking beer. I was asked if I wanted to go meet with Steve. I said, yeah. So I had Michael with me. We go for a car ride. We go to a Walmart parking lot in Cadillac. We don't know what's going on. 3 cars pull up. One people get out. We're in the car with an FBI agent. He drives us around up north. We never went to Whitmer's cabin. Never talked about it. We talked about the UP because he was supposed to be from Marquette. So to us, oblivious to what is even going on, we did stay at the camp that night. There was still no bunch of crazy talk or anything. It wasn't until the next day at about noon, we hear people calling us down. They have this thing, it's the infamous circle of trust. It's 4 or 5 FBI informants and 3 FBI agents trying to sell bombs to each other. And they got a bunch of us that they roped into this plot, and they're trying to get us to agree to a plan. Well, the whole group, even Adam Fox, the ringleader, they just stood there silent. So as the FBI tried to get everybody to do and partake in it, and nobody takes, we all dispersed. Me and Mike, I told my kid, I said, I think you guys are hungry, right? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, cool, we're getting the hell out of here. You know? That was in September. Shortly after that, we went back to the Capitol at a 2A event. Secret Service everywhere. It was weird at a 2A rally that the Secret Service was there. So I didn't think anything of it. It was normal 2A amendment. October 7th, we went to Lansing to buy my work truck, and there's cops everywhere. We don't know what's going on. We come home, we were going to get fuel in my truck, and we got jumped on. 16, 20 cars pulled up, rifles. They're freaking out, still oblivious. They won't tell us what's going on. And then the cop finally tells me, you're in Lansing trying to buy bombs. And I looked at my truck, and I was like, I don't think it's that bad. And he wasn't finding that funny at all. We got arrested at the gas station in Orangeville. They ended up taking us to the casino to interrogate us. So they took us off of state land into federal territory to interrogate us. While that was happening, they, like a bunch of cowards that they are, they already had us arrested. They go to the house where my wife and kids are, and they threaten to murder my father because he's hard of hearing. He came out with his hands up. He's trying to comply. And they told him, if you do not follow our directions, we'll put you down like a dog. Wow. They did this in front of my children. They were 13 and 16 at the time, and my wife. My wife's 120 pounds. I don't know what the hell they were afraid of. They threatened to murder him. After they get everybody out of the house, that's when they decide to drive an MRAP through the one side, blew out the slider doors, ransacked our house. The wife had a wine fridge in her bedroom, and they just flipped it over just to break it. I mean, they just destroyed the house. While this was happening, you might know. My 13-year-old daughter was home alone. She was trying to call us. We couldn't get a hold of her. Obviously, I was already arrested, and I had my wife in handcuffs. So they drove a MRAP over top of one of my cars, blew out the front door, and sent a drone in after her, and finally coaxed her out. But she had her cell phone on her, and they almost shot her because that's how, these guys are real tough people, real brave men to be afraid of a 13-year-old girl. And then they held the kids hostage for 4 to 6 hours and wouldn't let any adults come get them or anything. That's the worst part, I think, for the whole deal was what they did to our families. Yeah, so after they held our families hostage forever, locked up in handcuffs in the backseat of the cop cars. I found out later there was a sheriff's department there, and it wasn't Dar Leaf. It was the Allegan County Sheriff's Department came into Berry County and never notified Dar Leaf, who was the sheriff of my county, that they were going to do a high-risk warrant. We then I spent like 30 days in solitary confinement and then a week in max holding or some shit like that. And then they put us in general population. But I was ranked at a 2, and if anybody's ever been to jail, it's weird news to me. A 2, you can't be around the public. You can be in with all the hardened criminals. A 1, you go into, I forget what they call it. It's like you're into like a race car chariot. You're strapped in here, you can't go anywhere. So I was a 2, luckily, and I won. And after we finally got bond, we spent 2 months in jail. Our bond was set they wanted $1 million cash bond. Got it down to $250,000 cash bond. After a couple months in jail, we got it down to 10%. My sister put her house up to get us out of jail. We finally got to meet and talk to our lawyers, and the first thing they told us that if we could implement Sheriff Dar Leaf in this Whitmer plot, they could potentially drop our charges. So we were this big of a threat, and we were so guilty they could drop our charges. It didn't make sense. I told them a few choice words, but needless to say, I didn't know what was going on in this plot, so how the hell was Dar in there? Well, it turns out Dar, the whole lockdown and everything else, he wouldn't allow him to harass his people in Berry County. He's a stand-up sheriff. They make it out like we were best friends. The American Patriot Council. Where's Ryan at? They had a protest or a rally in Rosa Parks Circle. This was before, and Dar Leaf was one of the keynote speakers there. I was working security, he was working security, our militia was working security for that event. They still make it out like me and Dar are best friends, and I drink at his house. You know, he's a good sheriff, and I know him, but he's not like my best friend. But the news still portrays it as Dar is like this evil monster that hangs out with kidnappers. The guy who made the deal with us, his name was Greg Townsend. He was Attorney General for under Nessel. After he made this plea bargain agreement, and we told him no, they found out that he withheld evidence in a murder case. The guy was like caught on camera somewhere else. And the guy still prosecuted the case, got him put in prison. He spent 16 or 17 years in prison. They knew he was innocent. They finally let him out, and Nessel let him just run to Florida. She let him resign, and he ran to Florida. There's no accountability in government. It took us 2 years to get a preliminary exam. So we just sat on tether for 2 years. We're under house arrest for 9 months. After the 2 years we were in trial, Mike's lawyer asked the FBI, what did Mike Null do illegal during your entire investigation? The FBI said he's never done anything illegal in our whole investigation. So the judge still bound it over. So it took another year. We finally went to trial it started in August. So in September of 23, we finally were acquitted by a jury. The FBI, for the first week of the trial, sat there and lied under oath time and time again. They finally got called out. They changed the timestamps on the other defendant that was being tried with us. He worked security with Adam Fox at it was some firm. It was actually a former U.S. Marshal run it. They would work like security for Menards and stuff like that. He bought an RF detector, which is supposed to be a bug detector, and it was for his security job. Adam showed up to pick him up with Pam Chappell. who's the leader of the Wolverine Watchmen. They were going to take him for a ride. He doesn't know what they were doing, so he shows Adam some gadgets for his security, and then they take him for a ride. And after they don't even tell Eric what they were doing until they get to Whitmer's house and they drive past, and they were like, "This is what we brought you here for." So he doesn't know anything. He's 4.5 hours into this car ride, and they take him home. He goes inside and they leave. Well, the FBI changed the timestamp 4.5 hours to the point where it said, "This is what we're doing." And then they waited until, then they said when they got home, that's when Eric tried to give him this RF detector. Well, that changes the whole thing because now he's in it. Here's your material support. I got this equipment. The judge, he was allowing it. He kept allowing it until the attorney finally said, they're lying to the jury and they're doing it on purpose. The judge made him go back and look at the evidence, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we had a typo. This is the way it was." So the judge allowed him to testify for another 3 or 4 days. This is how corrupt our system is. The FBI picked our jury. They sat in a little corner, so they got like a table here, and there's a bunch of FBI agents with their computers, and they just walk out and they tell the Attorney General's office, "This is who you got to kick off the jury." So when you go against the FBI, you're fighting state and federal government. The corruption throughout the entire trial, they kept implementing it. We were talking to our lawyers in our hotel, and they had like 300 pages of evidence against us. But we found 40 of it that was just blatant lies, and there were some of these audio recordings that's actually their informant talking. And they were like, "Oh, that was one of the Null Brothers." Well, when we brought it up, I'm like, "No, that's Mark." And they never presented the evidence. And the other evidence they did, they would have you, when you go through trial, you cannot alter or change evidence, period. If it says that this picture was taken in April 30th of 2020, and you present that as evidence, but the picture was actually from 2018 at a Second Amendment rally, the judge just allowed them to take the wording off and let it go back into, so it's ridiculous. It's an uphill battle. You have to testify on your own behalf. I ended up testifying. The 7 agents or whatever they had that testified in our court, they couldn't corroborate each other's lies. And the judge just kept allowing it. And then when I got on the stand and I just told the truth, I think the jury, it was a no-brainer for them at this point in time that, everything that they said was a lie. For 4 years, they called us Wolverine Watchmen. We've never even met a watchman. At a couple of events that we were working security for, there'd be watchmen there, but it's an open public event. There might be 2,000 people there. So they take a picture of us over here, working security, and they would take a picture of these guys. See, they're in the crowd, they're friends, and they know each other. Well, that's like me saying, I've met every one of you guys, and we're all in it together now, guys. So it doesn't make no sense to me. So that's how corrupt these people are. We were both black belts in Taekwondo. We've done Taekwondo for 15 or 20 years. My kid and his kid were doing Taekwondo. We got arrested. They told the instructor that they would get him for providing material support for terrorism if he continued to train our children. So when they come after you, it's to destroy your entire life. The process of all of it is the punishment. They don't have to get you found guilty. They can bankrupt you. They can slander your name. They can do anything they want to you. And there's no recourse to it. But yeah, we ended up, like I say, we ended up finally getting not guilty. I think the best part of it all was they took 90 guns between mine and Mike's house, and they ended up hand-delivering 90 guns to my lawyer's office, and then they helped us put them back in our car and let us drive off. There's so many more details about this case that I just did a skim through. I guess if anybody's got questions or anything, unless you've got something else to say. Yeah, but if there's anything that anybody wants to know or anything else about it, then I would be open to explaining it. Like I said, there's so much that went on in this case that's...
At any point, anybody apologize?
No. No, nobody's been held accountable. Our charges were terrorist acts, material support for political gain. Everybody in the case that wasn't a defendant gained politically. The FBI, they gained politically. Everybody involved in it. Sanita, she was the Attorney General that was in charge of our case after the other one had resigned. She ended up going through and she got the 3 Wolverine watchmen put in prison in a sham trial. She got promoted to the U.S. Attorney's Office right after that. The lead agent, Special Agent Oompa Loompa there, he ended up going from the Flint field office. They promoted him to the Detroit field office. So every time somebody gets a victory, they get to go up and, they get to get a better society, I guess.
Okay, just real quick too. Anybody else have any questions? I can come around with the microphone right here.
Is there any way you can get financial compensation to them?
There is. If we had a lawyer that would actually take the case, we had a lawyer. We signed a retainer. The guy was going to do a pro bono, and just a coincidence, I'm assuming, but the building across the street from his in Canton, Michigan, exploded. So he hasn't talked to me since. So I don't know.
All right, we got one.
You said you started a militia. Are you still have a militia? Or?
No, we don't have a militia anymore. There's still anything, I have to watch everything I'm doing. So I ended up joining the Republican Party in Berry County. I'm now a delegate for the Berry County. I just hope that President Trump and Cash Patel, we find out who these people that are getting promoted in the FBI get fired, period. I hope they're talking to you. I hope they do. Those aren't good names. I didn't hear you, Bob.
He said he's been writing the names down of some of the people you've been mentioning tonight, and he actually he wants to turn them into himself as a citizen, to the United States government. Have you guys reached out to, have you heard any more from the FBI or anybody since the new administration has come in?
No, we've tried to talk to them on Twitter and all that, but we never get a response there. I don't know who runs theirs, but yeah, they don't hit you back up.
Do you have any plans of writing a book?
I'm not a real good writer, but my co-counsel, Damian Nunzio is my lawyer, and his daughter was Christina Nunzio. She's actually going to write a book or start it. We just got to get together and do it.
I'm Air Force veteran James Yalk. I'm going to give you guys a plug on InfoWars. So everybody around the country, this program's going on today. What the protesters outside don't understand, the federal government comes after you, they will fabricate evidence, they will bring people into lie. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I pass around a piece of paper, everybody should read it for the corruption's going on. The 3 things that people need to look up: prosecutor frames innocent man, prosecutors accuse one another, they were fabricating cases and whatnot, put people on death row. An Operation Vigilant Eagle, where they go after veterans for speaking out.
Yeah, that's the sick thing about our case was Daniel Harris, he's an actual Marine that they went after, and Paul Bellard, he was in the military too, I forget what branch, and then Joe Morrison. What you don't understand is if you're in the military and you serve, the second you're out, you go on a little magic list that the government keeps track of you. They have no problems going after you and pitting it on you and then using your service to this country against you in trial.
Hey, apologize if I missed this part of the story, but I'm wondering, could you tell us a little bit about the people that actually did
get convicted, or if they did, and were they framed, or was there any part of this that was actually real, or was it the whole thing a setup? Okay, I did drop a few names in there because Steve Robeson, he's the leader of the 3% Patriot Militia, he's the national commander of this group. Barry Croft, he was one of the guys who were found guilty in the federal trial. Steve attached himself to Barry because Barry was running his mouth about the FBI because the FBI killed one of his friends out in the desert in Arizona when his militia was working border security on their own. And that's how the whole thing started. They were going after Barry Croft. Steve Robeson, who's a felon and a pedophile, he's a convicted sex offender, is working for the FBI since like the 80s. He is now, they real upstanding folks that the FBI hires. And then they get to run rampant and do whatever they want. So he's a felon. He's not supposed to have firearms, and under federal law, because now he works for the federal government, he brought Barry a gun. Barry used to be a felon. He was pardoned by the governor of Delaware. A full pardon. He didn't have a felon. Or he didn't have a felony, but a felon brought him a gun, and the FBI started a felon with firearm investigation. That's how this whole thing started. They used to fly drones. Barry was a truck driver, so they would follow him with drones. So they spent like $6 million just on Barry in this case. Barry never did anything, just talked a bunch of crap online. Adam was starting a group, and he got to know the Wolverine Watchmen. The Wolverine Watchmen, they were like a prepper group. Dan Chappell was placed into that group. The FBI says that he came in and it was a big launch. It's all BS. They put him in that group. That group was more of a preppers group. They didn't do a bunch of firearms training. They didn't do a bunch of crazy nonsense. They voted Dan Chappell in as the leader of their group. So now the FBI informant is the leader of the Wolverine Watchmen. All the videos, because the news played it, they showed these guys driving in a car and then jumping out and shooting guns and everything. And the guy in the back seat taking the video recording is also the one instructing them on how to do it, and that's Dan Chappell. Then it was a couple months later, they talked to Steve. We had met Steve Robeson down at that meeting when they got together. And that's where we found out that he supposedly helped law enforcement with sex trafficking, but he is a pedophile. He asked Adam Fox to start a Michigan chapter of the 3% Patriot Militia. He then gave him members who happened to be FBI agents. I don't know if anybody in the group between him and Sean Fitz were actually, I think they were the only two that were not FBI in that group. Even Adam Fox's girlfriend turned out to be an informant for the FBI. So, and she was dating him. I think they had a kid together, but she turned on him at some point in time, and she was informing. She was an informant for the FBI. They brought her in to testify on ours, and she just pled the fifth so they could use her recordings. See, the FBI, that's another thing in trial. The FBI can use any recording they have, and they can cut it up anyhow they want to. So when Steve Robeson was getting these guys high or drunk and they would ask them a hypothetical question, they would go off on a rant on what they would do. Drugs are illegal in the federal system. Even though marijuana is legal here, it's illegal for an FBI agent because they have to go federal law. Steve is bringing drugs and alcohol to these guys to get these hypothetical conversations going. When the meeting happened down in Ohio, he bought the hotel and he paid for their room and board. And then in Cambria, Wisconsin, he took them all out to dinner and then rented hotel rooms for them. The Wolverine Watchmen made it to Cambria because Dan drove them there, rented a van and everything else. So everything, if they ever did anything illegal, it was at the direct hand of the FBI. If that answers your question. Because every single thing that happened, it was a direct response to what these guys want. They have even Adam Fox on recording telling him, we shouldn't even partake in this plan anymore, blah, blah, blah. He's telling Dan Chappell that. He's telling Dan Chappell that because Dan Chappell drove him everywhere. He's almost like a father figure to him. Adam Fox was homeless and lived in a vacuum repair shop in GR. And Dan would show up and drive him around and try to talk him into it. And they tried to give Adam a $5,000 credit card. He's homeless. They tried to give him money, he wouldn't take it. Does that sound like the ringleader of some terrorist plot?
We have one more question here, and then we'll call it good. Okay, guys?
Yep.
I was thinking, you said you skimmed the surface of this, and there's so much you went through. Did you lose faith in America, or what's your view of America these days?
The government, I never had faith in, to be honest with you. The American people, I never lost faith in, especially, folks like you. When the lockdown happened, the more people seen us active, the more people started pushing back. They needed a bit of a backbone to get them there. So I never lost faith in them. Here soon, I'm going to be filing my paperwork because I'm running for governor in 2026 as well.